Millionaire sees black street boy wearing his missing daughter's necklace. What he discovers changes everything. The red light on Fifth Avenue had never seemed to last so long. Robert Anderson, a 45-year-old businessman, drummed his fingers on the steering wheel of his Mercedes as he watched the typical Manhattan traffic when something froze his blood. A black boy of about 12 was weaving between the cars selling candy. But that wasn't what made Robert's eyes widen. It was what hung around the boy's thin neck, a silver necklace with a butterfly pendant encrusted with diamonds. The same necklace he had had specially made for Sophie last Christmas. The same Sophie, who had disappeared 4 days ago without a trace. Robert opened the car door before he even thought about it. "Hey, kid, wait." The boy Marcus, although Robert didn't know that yet, jumped up and started running. It wasn't paranoia, it was street experience. A rich white man yelling at him never meant anything good. "Please, I just want to talk about this necklace." Robert ran after him, ignoring the angry honking of cars stuck in traffic. "Where did you get this?" Marcus stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, panting. His brown eyes sized Robert up with the precocious wisdom of someone who had learned to survive on his own. "I didn't steal anything, sir. I swear to God I didn't." "I know you didn't steal it," Robert said, trying to control his trembling voice. "That necklace, it belonged to my daughter. She's missing." Marcus hesitated. There was something in this man's voice that didn't sound like the others. It wasn't anger or accusation. It was pure desperation. "I found a girl," he whispered finally. "She was hurt, hiding in an abandoned building in the Bronx. I thought she was dead, but she gave me this and asked me to find her father." Robert's world spun. "Where? Where is she?" "I took care of her for 3 days. She's alive, but Marcus bit his lip. She told me things about who did this to her. And, sir, I don't think this was a normal kidnapping." Robert felt something cold run up his spine. For 4 days, he had begged the police, hired private investigators, offered rewards. But it was a street kid, someone society didn't even see, who had found his daughter. "Take me to her now." Robert pulled out his car keys. "Okay, but there's something you need to know first," Marcus said quietly, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. "Before I found Sophie, I saw who left her there. And if I'm right about who it was," he paused, "you're not going to like this." Robert stopped. "What do you mean?" Marcus looked him straight in the eye. It was someone she knew, someone you trusted. And from the way he sounded on the phone while I was listening in, this was all planned to destroy you too. If your heart is racing with this story of betrayal and mystery, subscribe to the channel, because what Marcus discovered about the kidnappers' true identity will shock you as much as it shocked Robert. And the revenge they plan together is more satisfying than any justice you've ever seen. Marcus looked around once more before motioning for Robert to head toward the subway. "She's in the Bronx, but we can't take your car. It's too flashy. And, sir," he hesitated, "when we get there, don't yell or anything. She's really scared." During the 40-minute subway ride, Marcus recounted details that made Robert's stomach churn. Sophie had been hiding in the basement of an abandoned building for 3 days, dehydrated with marks on her wrists as if she had been tied up. Even more disturbing, she had whispered the name Uncle David several times, always followed by tears. David Mitchell, Robert's best friend for 20 years, Sophie's godfather, a minority partner in the company, the man who had comforted the family when Sophie's mother died the previous year. The same David who had insisted that Robert hire more private security in recent weeks, claiming to have bad feelings about the family's safety. "Here," Marcus whispered, stopping in front of a red brick building covered in graffiti. "She's in the basement. I got her some water and snacks, but she's barely eating." Robert followed Marcus down the dark stairs, his heart beating so hard he was sure it echoed through the damp hallway. And then he saw her, Sophie, his 9-year-old girl, huddled in a corner on a dirty mattress, clutching a teddy bear Robert had never seen before. "Daddy." Her voice was a hoarse whisper. When she lifted her face, Robert saw dark circles under her eyes and a look that no child should have. The look of someone who had seen things that would haunt her forever. Robert rushed to her, wrapping his arms around her carefully, as if she were made of glass. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe now." But as he held his daughter, his mind was racing. How did David know where to look? Why had he suggested hiring security just now? And more importantly, what kind of monster does this to a child? "Daddy," Sophie whispered in his ear. "Uncle David said it was a game that you knew about it, but then..." He got angry on the phone, yelling at someone about money and contracts. He said. She trembled. "He said that if I told anyone, something bad would happen to you too." Marcus watched the scene with his arms crossed. "Sir, there's more. She told me about your company. This Uncle David, he was talking on the phone about transferring money, about signing some papers while you were distracted looking for Sophie." Robert felt the blood drain from his body. Over the past 3 days, while he had been desperately searching for his daughter, David had temporarily taken over some of his responsibilities at the company. He had access to the accounts, the contracts, the clients, and Robert had given him permission to do everything, trusting his best friend blindly. "He dropped his cell phone once," Marcus continued. "I heard him talking to someone. When he finds out what happened to the company, his daughter's pain will seem like nothing." And then he laughed. "Sir," he laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. Robert closed his eyes, hugging Sophie tighter. 20 years of friendship, of trust, of sharing joys and sorrows. David had been by his side when his wife died. He had held Sophie in his arms at the hospital. He had been the first to offer help when she disappeared. And now, Robert understood why David had insisted so strongly that he not involve the police right away. "Let's give it a few more hours," he had said. "Maybe she's just lost. The police could complicate things unnecessarily." A few more hours for him to complete his financial sabotage. Marcus crouched down beside them. "Sir, I know this is hard to hear, but there's something you need to know about this man." He looked Robert straight in the eye. "He's not doing this alone. Yesterday morning when I brought Sophie her food, I saw him talking to 2 other men in suits near here. I recognized one of them from television. He's that politician who always talks about family and traditional values." Robert's world began to spin. This wasn't just personal betrayal. It was a conspiracy involving powerful people, and he had been the perfect target, a man vulnerable from the recent loss of his wife, completely focused on his business, trusting those closest to him blindly. But as he held Sophie and looked at Marcus, a boy whom society had made invisible, but who had been the only one to truly help his family, something changed inside Robert. The pain was turning into something more dangerous. Determination. "Marcus," he said quietly, "do you want to help bring these men down?" The boy nodded without hesitation. "Then we're going to have to be a lot smarter than they think we are." Because what David and his accomplices didn't know was that Robert hadn't risen to the top of the business world by being naive. And now, with the truth revealed and an unlikely ally at his side, The revenge that was taking shape would be more devastating than anything they could have imagined. Over the next 24 hours, while Sophie recovered in a private hospital under a false name, Robert did something David would never have expected. He stopped searching for his daughter publicly. He canceled the media alerts, dismissed the private investigators, and told everyone he needed time to process the situation. David called 3 times that first day, his voice heavy with fake concern. "Robert, my friend, you can't give up now. Sophie needs you to be strong." It was almost impressive how sincere he sounded, knowing exactly where she was the entire time. But Robert wasn't giving up. He was planning. And his first move was something no millionaire businessman would ever do. He temporarily moved into a modest apartment in the Bronx, 3 blocks from where Marcus lived on the streets. Because if there was going to be a war, he needed real intelligence, not expensive detectives David could buy. Marcus proved to be a more valuable ally than Robert could ever have imagined. The kid knew every corner of that neighborhood, every homeless person, every broken camera, and every blind spot in the city's surveillance network. More importantly, he was completely invisible to people like David and his henchmen. Mr. Robert, Marcus said, had grown up in the same neighborhood as Marcus and hated powerful men who abused the system. "Let me get this straight," Elena said, reviewing the documents Robert had brought her. "Your best friend kidnapped his daughter to buy. Time to loot his company, and now he's pretending to help you look for her." She laughed bitterly. Typical. And I bet he already has a plan to come out looking like the hero in the end. Elena was right. Through contacts unknown to David, Robert discovered that his best friend had devised a plan to find Sophie in a dramatic staging within 48 hours. He would be the hero who saved his friend's daughter, earning eternal gratitude, and no one would suspect that he had orchestrated the whole thing. Meanwhile, Marcus became the perfect spy. David and his accomplices spoke freely around him as if he were a piece of furniture. The boy discovered names, meeting places, even bank account passwords mentioned in careless conversations. "They're meeting tomorrow at 2 hours in the afternoon at an Italian restaurant on the east side." Marcus reported the politician will receive $50,000 for his cooperation. And there's a third man, someone from the police department who's making sure the kidnapping investigation doesn't get close to the truth. Robert felt a cold, calculating anger take hold of him. David had not only betrayed a 20-year friendship, he had corrupted police officers and politicians, turned the kidnapping of an innocent child into an elaborate hoax to cover up corporate theft. But Elena had the best news of all. "Robert, do you know that David made a fatal mistake?" She showed him bank documents she had obtained through legal contacts. "He moved the money from your company using wire transfers that leave permanent traces. What's more, to speed up the process, he used his own personal account as a bridge." "What does that mean?" "It means we have irrefutable documentary proof that he stole from you. These aren't just suspicions or theories. It's evidence that no expensive lawyer could contest." That night, while Sophie slept peacefully in a safe hospital room, Robert looked out the window of the modest apartment where he was staying. Marcus was teaching some younger boys how to play chess on a makeshift board. It was a scene that made him think about who really mattered in life. "Marcus," he said when the boy climbed up, "tomorrow we're going to put our plan into action. But first, I need you to know that after this is all over, you're not going back to the streets ever." Marcus looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Are you sure?" "I'm not like you guys. I don't know how to be rich." "You don't need to be rich, Marcus. You need to be free. And after what we do tomorrow, David and all his powerful friends will learn that underestimating people like us was the biggest mistake of their lives. Because while David thought he had orchestrated the perfect crime, he hadn't accounted for three crucial variables: the determination of a desperate father, the intelligence of an invisible boy who heard everything, and the wrath of an entire community that was about to discover how rich men toyed with human lives for the sake of greed. The meeting at the Italian restaurant was set for Tuesday, but David and his accomplices didn't know that their every word would be recorded, every transaction documented, and every lie exposed on camera, turning their private betrayal into a devastating public humiliation. What none of them realized was that Robert had learned something fundamental about revenge during those days in the Bronx. Sometimes the best strategy is not to attack from the top down with power and money, but from the bottom up with truth and justice, especially when you have allies your enemies can't even see. Tuesday arrived with a gray sky that seemed to anticipate the storm that was about to break over David Mitchell. At 2 sharp, he entered the East Side Italian restaurant wearing his $3,000 suit, smiling with a confidence of someone who believes he has orchestrated the perfect crime. Marcus was strategically positioned at a corner table, pretending to be just another delivery boy. No one paid any attention to him, exactly as planned. The discreet microphone sewn into his jacket picked up every word with crystal clarity, transmitting everything to Elena, who was monitoring from a van parked 2 blocks away. "Gentlemen," David said, greeting Congressman Harrison and Detective Murphy. "I hope you appreciate expensive champagne because today we celebrate our complete victory." What David didn't know was that Robert had spent the last 48 hours not only gathering evidence, but building a network of exposure that would turn this private meeting into a devastating public spectacle. 3 hidden cameras captured different angles of the table. 2 investigative journalists waited outside. And most importantly, the live feed was already being sent to a social media account with over 200,000 followers. "50,000 for you, Harrison," David said, sliding an envelope across the table. "And 30 for Murphy for keeping the investigation off us." He laughed arrogantly. "Robert still thinks we're looking for his daughter. Pathetic." It was then that Marcus calmly stood up and walked over to their table. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said with a politeness that contrasted with his simple clothes. "My name is Marcus, and I have something that belongs to you." David frowned, irritated. "Kid, I don't know who you are, but Aunt Sophie," Marcus interrupted, his voice gaining a firmness that made the 3 men freeze. "I'm the one who heard every word you've said over the last 4 days. And I'm the one broadcasting this conversation, live to the entire world right now." David's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" Marcus smiled, no longer the smile of a vulnerable boy, but of someone who had learned to play chess with masters. "Look around you, gentlemen. See that woman reading the newspaper? She's an investigative reporter. The man at the bar, federal attorney. And those 3 people who walked in 5 minutes ago, FBI agents." Harrison tried to stand, but his leg shook so badly he almost fell. That's impossible. We were careful." "You were arrogant," said a familiar voice behind them. Robert Anderson appeared, walking calmly toward the table, followed by Elena and 2 federal agents. "You underestimated a desperate father, a brilliant lawyer, and especially a boy you couldn't even see." David stood up abruptly, panic finally overcoming his composure. "Robert, you don't understand. I can explain all of this. We've been friends for 20 years. Friends don't kidnap their friends' daughters," Robert replied with icy calm. "Friends don't steal their friends' companies. And friends certainly don't laugh about causing psychological trauma to a 9-year-old child. Elena opened a thick folder. David Mitchell, you're formerly charged with kidnapping, extortion, money laundering, corruption of public officials, and criminal conspiracy. She looked at Harrison and Murphy. You too, gentlemen. But the real devastation was yet to come. Marcus pulled out a tablet, showing the screen to the three men. Want to see something interesting? Our live stream already has over 500,000 views. The comments are, well, you can imagine. The screen showed a flood of indignant messages. Justice for Sophie was trending. David Mitchell's name was being associated with child abductor and psychopathic traitor in thousands of posts. His company had lost 40% of its market value in 2 hours. His wife had already posted a statement publicly divorcing him. Harrison was hyperventilating. My career, my family, I have children. Sophie has a family, too, Robert said coldly. Did you think about that when you decided to participate in her trauma for $30,000? Murphy tried to negotiate. I can hand over information on other cases. I can cooperate with the justice system. Too late to try to be a hero. Elena said, you had a 20-year career to do the right thing. You chose to do the wrong thing when you thought no one was watching. As the three men were handcuffed, David made one last desperate attempt. Robert, please. We grew up together. You were best man at my wedding. This can't end like this. Robert stared at him for a long moment. You're right, David. This can't end like this. He paused. This needs to end with complete justice. And then came the final blow. Elena showed him another document. David, do you remember the transfer you made? Using your personal account as a bridge? Well, it turns out that wasn't just evidence of theft. She smiled. The IRS wants to talk to you about the last 10 years of your tax returns. It looks like you owe the government about $2 million in unpaid taxes. At that moment, David Mitchell realized the full magnitude of his destruction. It wasn't just prison. It was total bankruptcy, public divorce, children who would change their last names, a reputation that would never recover, and decades in prison. As he was led away by the agents, David looked back one last time. Robert was hugging Marcus, and both were watching through the restaurant window as a small crowd had gathered outside, applauding the arrest being broadcast live. How? David muttered to himself. How did a street kid and a desperate manage to destroy me so completely? The answer was simple, but David would never understand it. They hadn't underestimated anyone, while he had underestimated everyone. And in this game of power, those who underestimate always lose everything. In the center of that restaurant, where minutes earlier corruption and cruelty had been celebrated, a new reality was now taking shape, like a symphony that finally finds its harmony after years of dissonant notes, proving that true justice knows no social class, skin color, or limitations imposed by those who confuse power with impunity. 6 months later, Robert Anderson was sitting in the office of Anderson and Associates, the new consulting firm he had founded after selling his stake in his previous company. Through the panoramic window, he looked out at Manhattan from a completely different perspective. It was no longer just about profit. It was about purpose. Marcus knocked on the door holding a thick folder. Now 13, he wore the uniform of the prestigious St. Andrew's Preparatory School, but he had the same determination in his eyes. Mr. Robert, the foundation reports are in. We got another 250 kids off the streets this quarter. The Marcus and Sophie Foundation, created with some of the money recovered from David's scheme, had become a national model for child protection programs. Sophie, now 10 and in therapy, had insisted that she take Marcus's name as well. He saved me first, she had said simply. Elena entered shortly after, now a partner in the firm and legal director of the foundation. "I have news about our old friends," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. David was sentenced to 25 years without parole. Harrison lost his re-election by 82% of the vote, the biggest defeat in the state's political history. And Murphy, she laughed bitterly. "He's serving drinks at a roadside bar in Nevada." But the consequences went far beyond prison. The live video of the arrest had gone viral with over 50 million views. Never Underestimate became a social movement. 3 documentaries were produced about the case. More importantly, dozens of other cases of corruption came to light after ordinary people realized they had the power to confront injustice. Robert looked at the framed photo on his desk. Him, Sophie, and Marcus on the day of the official adoption. Marcus had chosen to keep his original last name, but he was now legally Sophie's brother. "I want to honor where I came from," he had explained, "but I also want to belong somewhere." That afternoon, the 3 of them were driving home from Sophie's school when she asked a question none of them expected. "Dad, have you forgiven Uncle David?" Robert stopped driving for a moment. "Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, Sophie. It means not letting someone's anger control your life. David chose to be cruel, but we chose to be better." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, on. "The streets. You learned that revenge is different from justice. Revenge is about hurting those who hurt you. Justice is about preventing them from hurting other people." Sophie smiled. "And it's also about building something better, right?" That was exactly right. Robert's company now employed exclusively people who had been underestimated by the system. Former homeless people, rehabilitated ex-convicts, skilled immigrants, people with disabilities. Productivity was 28% above the industry average, and turnover was nearly 0. Marcus had become a speaker at schools, telling his story to thousands of young people. "You are not invisible," he would say. "You are underestimated, and that is your greatest advantage, because when no one expects anything from you, anything you do surprises them." That night during dinner, Robert received a call. It was the governor, wanting to discuss a state partnership for the social reintegration program Marcus had helped develop. When he hung up, he found his 2 children looking at him with pride. "You know what impresses me most about all this?" said Sophie, playing with a butterfly necklace she now wore all the time. "Uncle David thought he knew Dad, but he only knew who Dad pretended to be to make people like him. When he saw who Dad really was, it was too late." Marcus laughed. "It's like chess. You let your opponent think he's winning while you position your pieces. By the time he realizes what's happening, the game is over." Meanwhile, in a federal penitentiary 400 kilometers away, David Mitchell sat in a small cell, rereading for the 1,000th time the news about the success of the family he had tried to destroy. His wife had remarried. His children had changed their last names. His assets had been auctioned off to pay damages. What tormented him most was not that he had lost everything. It was knowing that Robert and Marcus had built something greater than he ever could. While he destroyed out of envy, they created out of love. Robert closed his laptop that night, satisfied. The table next to him was covered with drawings Sophie had made. The whole family together, including Elena, who had become more than just a partner. They were living proof that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. Marcus walked into the room to say goodnight, as he had done every night for the past 6 months. "Mr. Robert, Can I ask you a question? Closed his laptop that night, satisfied. The table next to him was covered with drawings Sophie had made. The whole family together, including Elena, who had become more than just a partner. They were living proof that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. Marcus walked into the room to say goodnight, as he had done every night for the past 6 months. Mr. Robert, can I ask you a question? Always. Do you think all this would have happened if Uncle David hadn't been so greedy? Robert thought for a moment. Maybe not, Marcus. Sometimes bad people do us the greatest favor of our lives by showing us who we really are when we're tested. And that was exactly what it was. David had tried to break a family, but ended up forging an even stronger one. He had tried to steal a child's future, but ended up giving him a home. He had tried to destroy a man, but ended up revealing a hero. The real victory wasn't seeing David in prison. It was seeing Sophie laugh again, Marcus graduate with honors, and hundreds of other families reunited through the foundation that was born out of pain and turned into hope. Because in the end, the best revenge is never destroying those who hurt you. It's building something so meaningful that their evil becomes irrelevant. Proving that love and justice always win when brave people decide not to accept injustice as their inevitable fate. If this story of courage, family, and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that true heroes are those who turn their greatest pains into purpose, and that sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what really matters in life.